The University of California, Riverside presents Blue, Gold, and Black, the podcast that's dedicated to amplifying Black voices at UCR. I'm Dominique Beal from UCR's Community Engagement and Outreach Unit. In each episode, we'll be talking to UCR students, campus leaders, and community partners to explore the intersection of being Black and being a Highlander at UCR. And I can't wait for you to meet today's guest. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to Blue, Gold, and Black, a podcast dedicated to amplifying Black voices here at UCR. I am your host, Dominique Beal, and today we have a special guest with us, Wilbert Pines, who works out of the Students Disability Resource Center as an accessible tech specialist. We're going to be talking to Will today just to learn a little bit about his background and some of his life experiences that influence the work that he does today. We're also going to get some more information about exactly what the Student Disability Resource Center is and who they cater to and help support on campus. Will, how are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Dom. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking, trying to maintain positive spirits and everything. Thank you so much for joining us on Blue, Gold, and Black. We're super happy to amplify your voice today. So let's go ahead and just kind of dive right in. So really quickly, if you can, just give us a quick snapshot of exactly what it is that you do here at UCR. What exactly is an accessibility tech specialist responsible for?
Well, sure, no doubt. Well, one of the things I do is as far as a campus resource, is to make sure that we're in compliance with federal and state guidelines for access to information. That can include anything from a simple syllabus handout to a student's textbook, to a student that's, somebody, there's a lot of students out there on skateboards and bikes. And they may not know this, but our office, we can serve them on a temporary basis. So maybe they need transportation pickup, things like that. And so it's more of a holistic view of supporting students that have disabilities, whether it be temporary, permanent, and from a faculty point of view, helping faculty to make sure that their materials are accessible.
Wow. Okay. Very good. Thank you for sharing that with us. So before we kind of dive deeper into a little bit of more what that entails, let's kind of put the lens and focus on you a little bit in your life. Can you tell us where you grew up?
I grew up in Ponchatoula, Louisiana. It's a small town about 40 miles north of New Orleans, just across Lake Pontchartrain, if you're familiar with that area. It's a great place. It's known as the strawberry capital of the world.
Okay, very cool. So kind of walk us through a little bit of some of your kind of childhood experiences growing up there and some of the things, I guess, that you kind of witnessed as a child that were pretty instrumental, I guess, in terms of the man you are today.
Okay. I always think back to when I get similar questions like this, I think back to a time I had to be about, 7, 8, 9, I don't know. And I was in elementary school, 3rd or 4th grade. And my cousin and I, we wanted to be in the Cub Scouts. And we went to a little information meeting one evening. My aunt took us because my mom was out working. And we got there, and basically each person was assigned to what they call a den leader. And we were picked. The person who was supposed to be our den leader, apparently she quit on the spot.
Wow.
We kind of had an idea of what was, as kids, even at that age, we kind of had an idea of what was going on, but wasn't really sure. But we're only, 7, like I said, 3rd grade, maybe 10 years, maybe 8 years old, 9 years old. But our aunt took us out, and we left. Our aunt took us out, and we got a call the next day from another den mother who eventually accepted us to enter their den as Cub Scouts. And I think that was one of the first times that I can remember. I'm 49 years old now, but that's one of the first times that I can remember a direct in your face, just because of the person, that's because of who you look like. This person had never seen us before and decided to quit on the spot because of us.
And so, wow. And it's crazy kind of that you say that, because that kind of just ties into, this aspect of socialization that, you know, Black people, in particular Black children, go through, and how oftentimes at a very young age, right, elementary school, somewhere between 2nd and 6th grade, you know, Black children experience some type of moment, whether they fully understand it or not is one thing, but they experience some type of moment that puts into context, like, there is some significance to being Black in terms of how other people react and treat me. Talk to us a little bit about your town. Was it a predominantly Black town? Was it kind of multicultural? Give us a little bit more context about your town that you grew up in.
The actual town, like I said, we had about 25, at the time I was staying there, there were about 2,500, no more than 3,000 people there.
Wow.
The street that I lived on, it was actually in my little, wouldn't say a block, half a block. My grandmother purchased land so that all of her children could be in the same area and have homes in the same area.
Wow.
And there was three of the 7 children there. But I had friends of Italian, Native American, white, Black, whatever. And even in the school, it was the same way. Even though it was a small town, that's how it was. So it was kind of, at that moment, it was really surprising to get that kind of reaction from someone who didn't know. I mean, it wasn't like we were great students. You know, I had a 4.0 the whole elementary career of academic time. We weren't troublemakers. I mean, sure, there's people that got in trouble for different things, but the way we were raised, it was, if I was at my cousin's house or if I was in my friend's house, if I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, then that parent had the authority from the mom or the parents to, you know, keep us straight.
So the community was very strong, very close.
To me, the community was strong.
Right.
I think in thinking about that, after having just thinking about this, even in school, I know that there were times where just the color of my skin made people take a step back. In a way that whether way I was performing academically or just socially, well, wow, I didn't expect this from you, or from on the other side, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to you just because of who you are. I don't really know you, but just because of who you are. So I think it was a mix. You know, you had it from, and I think it was on the extremes. It was either you're accepted or not. You know, so I think that's how. I don't know. Like I say, my friends, the way we grew up was you treat people how you want to be treated.
Right. And so, well, you know, that's an interesting kind of dynamic, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit, but I also want to kind of just go back to where you mentioned that your grandmother had purchased land. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? At least as much as you know in terms of your family history, because just in the broad sense, you know, when we look at, you know, Black history and the struggle for liberation, land is obviously a very key component, especially down south. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because that's really interesting.
And actually, I've been trying to I kind of started a little project a couple of years ago on just getting some genealogy stuff together. Yeah. And I've been finding some records on things, and there's whole gaps of 30, 40 years that I just can't find information on. Trying to go back to this, I know that, like I say, my grandmother has 7 kids. My aunt, one of my aunts, my mother, and another aunt were the only 3 that was actually on the land. Actually, had homes on the land. So most of it was just open fields or wooded areas, and so we grew vegetables, grew fruit, grew corn. My uncle was a jack of all trades, and I learned a lot from him. Wow! I'm actually doing that today. I've got a garden in the backyard. I've got some pumpkins and corn growing back in the backyard right now.
Nice.
Like I say, I'd like to know more about it, and I know there's land within the extended family in other areas of the state of the county. Or say it's a parish. We have parishes as opposed to counties. That there's a lot of wooded area that has been used for logging illegally up until this day, and so I know there's family members that's still fighting over that in the court. So
wow,
It's just one of those things that it's, and there's, time is so precious and valuable that it's, I've got sheets of things where I've asked parents or other older generations, just tell me something about you, and I'll just write down as much as I can. It's just making the time to get that information so that I can find, make a linear timeline to find out, where are we now, where were we, and how do we get to where we are now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's super fascinating. So I definitely commend you on your diligence, because that's not easy work. It's very hard, especially for our people. But kind of taking the attention off of that and kind of moving it back towards your experience coming up, like through the K through 12 system. What inspired you to pursue higher education? Was it a particular influence in your life, a role model, a teacher, a parent, or anyone, or was it something that you just always knew you wanted to do?
I think early on, I always remember my mom reading. She would every time I saw, she always had a book in her hand. Whether it was some, a novel. We used to fight over the TV guide. Some of you guys are probably too young to remember this, but we used to get a TV guide, an actual a paper printed TV guide.
Right.
Find out what your shows are, and there was always a crossword puzzle in the back of the book.
Okay.
And we'd always fight over whoever got the TV guide first got to do the puzzle. But I think that, part of it is just my own, who I am, just wanting to learn. I know my mom would tell me stories about how I used to wear leg braces on my feet because I had what they call it, I forgot what the term they use, but I had to wear braces on my feet. And apparently at one point I had found a way to unloosen the screws. I used to take apart my bikes, all my toys, and try to put them back together. And so it was always that knowledge to learn something, how do things work. And then I enjoyed school. I loved school. So I always tried to be, and I'm the type that I try to, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to do my best at it. And so I think that's part of it. Other is certainly with my mom. She used to stress to us how important the education was. And so that's always been a driving force. My mom and her ethic, her work ethic, her social ethic, and just her as a parent and a mom and a friend and a confidant, So, I would say from her.
Okay, beautiful. And so kind of talk to us about, your experience of getting into higher education. So what schools did you want to go to? Were you part of like any particular programs, or where exactly did your path start to lead you once you graduated high school?
Like I said, I lived in Louisiana until 1988. My stepfather was a machinist. And he had been in an accident early in his life, and basically he was told by his doctor he had to change his job or he was going to lose his legs. So that's how I came to California. My aunt owned her own janitorial service, and she's also was an apartment complex manager. And so we came out to help and expand on that.
In what area of California exactly?
Oakland, California.
Oakland, okay.
California.
So really quick, talk to me about, if any, the culture shock from going to a small town, 3,000 folks in, Louisiana to Oakland, California. Kind of talk to us about that experience.
It was incredible. Like I said, the town I grew up in, we had 2,500, 3,000 people there at the time. And when I get to California, so we got here in August, started school late, I think after Labor Day or something like that. But the high school I went to had more people in the high school than I had in my whole town.
Right, exactly.
I'll never forget. I took a free called what's it called? I think it was called free economics class. Mr. Bockert, I'll never forget him. We had 35 students in the class, and there were 28 different countries represented in that one class.
Oh wow!
Incredible learning experience. We had this thing we called the hot seat. And every day you go, he picked the first person on the first day, and you go in the front of the seat, and anyone could ask you any questions they wanted. And so you had to be read up on your current events and things like that. And then whoever, the next person to answer the last question got to pick the next person to go up. Me being from Louisiana, everyone thought I had a funny accent, so I kept getting picked because they just wanted to hear me talk.
Right,
I kept getting picked. And so that was a great experience. I want to back up a little bit on that. In my sophomore year, my counselor, my world history instructor, was also my counselor.
Okay.
Again, small town, they're doing double duties.
Right.
But she went around the classroom and asked everyone, "What do you want to do when you graduate? What's after high school?" And so one of the things I said, well, I always wanted to serve in the military, but I also wanted to go to college. And I said I didn't know if college was going to be an option for me just because of cost or whatever. But I just wasn't sure which path I should go. Should I do one first or the other? And she had me come speak with her, and she's enlightened me about the service academies. Basically, you're going to college while you're preparing to be an officer in the military. She asked me if I thought about it. I said I didn't know anything about it, but she gave me the packet. I applied. Long story short, I got accepted. And this was just before I moved to California. Wow. One thing to be able to go to the service academy is you have to have a congressional nomination from your state.
Oh, okay.
And so I secured that nomination as part of the package. This is one of the things you have to get done. Secured that nomination, but then I was moving to California, so I didn't know if that was going to jeopardize my chances. I was still able to get that nomination. Eventually, I was still able to go to the service academy at West Point, United States Military Academy at West Point. And I didn't graduate. Other issues went on and happened there, but I did come back and went to serve in the military in the United States regular Army.
Oh, wow.
As an aviation specialist.
Okay, wow. So a lot happened in terms of that transition from Louisiana to Oakland. So
from summer of '88, I was in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and then summer of '89, I was in New York. I was from California to New York. So it's 2,000 people. Several million people that back into the military.
Right. So that's very interesting. So talk to us about then kind of the higher educational experience you got going through the service academies and being an aviation specialist and all of that. I'm sure there's a lot we can unpack there.
Yeah. Of course, I served. So that was '89. I resigned my commission from the military academy, and then I went right back into the regular Army. Went back to basic training again. After I finished basic training, we went to the schooling for our job, our specialty that we'd be trained in. I was in aviation. Normally, that program takes about a year, but due to the first Iraqi war, we did it in about 6 months. And I was immediately sent to South Korea as my duty station, and from there, working on the types of aircraft. I worked on the Apache helicopter as an aviation electronics and weapons system specialist. We had more training on the systems than the pilots because they were brand new systems. And so what I did was every 3 or 4 months, I was hopping from place to place, duty station, going around training these pilots just before the Gulf War. And I did that for about 2.5 years between several different countries. After that.
So in a way, that's kind of like a precursor to your work as an accessibility tech specialist, right?
Because somewhat, yeah. So once I got out of the military, I came back to Northern California. Went back to the community college there in the San Francisco Bay Area, Diablo Valley College in Pleasant Hill, and I was taking an English class. Another story about that, maybe it's another podcast about all that happening.
Right.
The instructor she said, I would want to recommend you to be an English skills tutor. And so I was working in the English skills tutoring lab, basic skills. I also worked as an aide in the classroom for the English instructors. And one of my students that I was tutoring, she had a visual impairment. And in our lab, I couldn't help her because we didn't have the technology to help her. So I went to the high tech lab and said, "Hey, I need you to teach me whatever it is I need to know so that I can help my student." And that worked out really well. The director there at in the lab he said, "Well, since this worked out so well for this student, can you help all of our students with disabilities?" I said, "Sure, let me know. I need to know what I need to know." And so what I did was I worked with the students who were already seasoned on the assistive technology that was available at the time. Again, this was in 98, 96 through 96, 97. And so it worked out really well. And I actually transitioned from English. I should say I had 5 jobs at the college.
Wow.
I worked as an English skills tutor.
Yeah.
I worked in high-tech center lab as an assistant. I was an aide in the classroom for ESL classes. I was kind of the computer tech in the lab, in both labs as well, also 2 different timesheets. And so once I started working with the students with disabilities, using my background in the computer science that I knew, and using what they were telling me what the assistive technology could do and what they needed, putting all those together to figure out how can I help this student access whatever they need. At that time, if it was a textbook, we didn't have the high-speed scanners that we have right now. So it was taken page by page at a time, converting it to a WAV file format. And so they can have an audio version of something, or sending it to a Braille printer that was as large as 6-foot table. It was so loud that it was encased in another case. But it was still loud. But and from that, I think that because when I went back to college, I wanted to be I just wanted to be in computer science. But after having that experience, being able to help someone with what I knew, and them helping me to get that level of knowledge or of what they were, of the technology that they were using, it just continued to inspire me to learn more about this field. And I've been doing it ever since.
Well, interestingly enough, it seems like your whole life you were kind of primed for this field. Like, I'm like, I guess if you want to say, like, one of the first people that I guess was savvy enough with tech to kind of usher in this field of tech assisting, persons with disabilities. And I can imagine all of the tech that you got to work on in the military. By the time you came back to civilian tech, you were really in prime position to kind of just accelerate a lot of what they were doing, I would imagine.
Exactly. It's interesting that oftentimes, people just in passing, the personal computer was very new to everyone at that time. There wasn't, certainly not as much as available that there is now. And a lot of them didn't even have as much processing power as your cell phone that you hold around in your hand every day.
Exactly.
So oftentimes people will be saying, I've got this problem, and quickly I would say, here, this is what you need to do, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
And it was done.
Right.
Even then, I could feel the hesitation or the skepticism of recommendations I would make, and they would take them 2 or 3 times before they would come back and say, oh, did you say something a couple of weeks ago about such and such, do you remember what that was? I say, yeah, I know exactly what it was. And they come back, oh yeah, that worked. I say, oh, okay, that's great.
Right.
But, like I say, it's always been an ongoing thing about, just appearance.
Yeah. Well, it's a tax almost, like it's a tax a lot in a lot of ways, and even having, these interviews that I've been doing, like I've come across that same experience, from multiple people that I've spoken with, like either people being completely shocked that this person of color or this black person in particular is either leading or the senior person on a project or is the expert on the situation, or what they're suggesting actually holds weight and is legitimate, and it's a tax, and it kind of goes into who you are naturally as a person, but how you even still have to double that, right? It's just like that constant chip on your shoulder. So even if you are a high achiever, how much more achievement and how much more higher do you have to go even above that just for someone to come 3 weeks later and be like, oh, weren't you that one guy that, mentioned this to us? Oh, yeah, that was the right answer. That can be very tough to deal with.
Yeah. Even with, oftentimes, especially even certainly in today's world where everyone's remote and sometimes you're communicating by email, you don't see a face.
Yes.
And then when you first see that person and I'm first seeing in person, and they're like, they kind of take you see it. It may be quick, it may be even less than a split second, but you see it and you notice it, and they're taken aback. by who this person is that's been behind an email address or on the phone.
Exactly.
Even the person, like I said, going back to that Diablo Valley College, she, I don't know, probably a year after I had started working in there, and found out that I had been in the military and had served and some of the things I've done. She goes, "Wow," her statement was that, "Wow, I have a new respect for you." And it wasn't, and to me, the way I took it, and maybe it was wrong, but just my experience took it as if, not that it was something as a compliment, but like I viewed you here, now I view you here, as opposed to you were, wow, you're up here, now I view you even higher.
Right, like almost giving you some validation that you weren't even seeking in the first place,
Right, exactly.
And it is tough because, we all have those moments. Microaggression is a super, popular phrase that's used for those types of moments, but it's because of a lived experience, right? That over time, over experience after experience, trains us to pick up on that coded language, even if the person who's speaking that language isn't fully cognizant of it, but that lived experience is extremely valid. So let's take all of this context now that we've kind of built up, and let's start talking about how you found yourself here at UCR.
I was working at Grossmont College in San Diego County. Did that for 17 years, kind of doing what I'm doing right now. And when I say kind of, even though the job description somewhat mirrors what I'm doing here, I started the program there at Grossmont College, the same program that we're kind of building here as a team.
Right.
I'm in charge of it, but we're building it as a team because I need that a student sees a counselor and the student is referred to me. I need to have some background on that student to make sure that I'm making the proper recommendations in a timely manner. At the other place, and I'm not taking anything away from it, it was more of a, here, I need you to do this, this, and this for this student. I said, well, if I'm the expert in this field, shouldn't it be me determining what may be the best option for this student based on what that student's experience already is right now, and go forward from there, as opposed to being, here's a transaction. If that's the case, why am I even in this position? Just have someone transaction and giving the student this, whatever it is, why you think it is, as opposed to letting me do my job as the expert in the field, And after, I kind of found ways around it. But after, 17 years, it gets to a point where you feel, I just felt stagnant. I knew I could do more. I wanted to do more because I live on this principle that wherever I am, no matter where I am, at some point, somebody, someone, something has gotten me to where I am.
Sure.
Someone has helped me along the way. Someone has, and you can tell help as in, it was a negative experience and where you turn it into a positive experience, or it was a positive experience and where you even increase that positive experience for not only for yourself, but for someone else. And so that's just who I am. That's who I am. I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, because someone helped me, I want to pay it forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that's what continues to drive me to want to help others.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that also is kind of what inspired me to start working in education as well, because of the people who, pushed me to graduation, in some cases dragged me to graduation. They were, and really at the base of it was just a very core understanding of empathy, right? Understanding, like you said, a student's needs, right? Them taking the assessment of their experiences with me and assessing what I need and putting me in those positions to get what I need to help me be successful. So talk to us a little bit about the Student Disability Resource Center, because I think when we hear the word disability, there might be two, maybe three like key images of what we think that word means and who can utilize this resource center. So I kind of want to break down some of those walls or some of those barriers that might keep students, in particular our, Black and African American students who really suffer from, the stigma of disability in our community can be, really preventing us from, accessing resources for one reason or another. So help me kind of break down some of those walls around the word disability and what exactly the Resource Center does to help our students.
Okay. One of our goals, our mission here is I've been at UCR for a little over a year and a half right now. And one of the things I have learned is that even though we have a small office, we serve probably, 1,500 students a quarter. And
a
national
quarter,
averages, national averages say you're probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of your population has a disability, whether it's hidden or visible.
Okay.
And students have to self-report or self-disclose closed. It's upon the student to come into the office to ask for the resource.
Okay.
And one of the things that students may not know is, like we kind of touched on this earlier. Let's say you're riding your skateboard and you go down and you break your arm for some reason, twist your arm, can't carry your textbooks. We can serve you. Okay, that's a temporary disability. Maybe you need mobility transportation, so we can authorize a form so that TAPS can help transport you to your classroom. Maybe you can get your books in an e-text format so that you don't have to carry around 10 books or piles of books with a broken arm, or if you're on crutches or anything like that. Those things can be dealt with. Students with more traditional permanent or even not so semi-permanent, we call what I would call as semi-permanent disabilities, we authorize accommodations. Now, what that means, certainly in higher education, is we provide accommodations to ensure access, as opposed to K through 12, where some students with disabilities may have been things are written or accommodations are given to provide success. There's a difference between that. Okay, you're given you will do this, you will do A, B, and C, and you will be successful. Okay, I'm going to say you have a visual impairment. We're going to make sure that you have, if you're using a screen reader or you're using text to audio, it's giving you access to those materials so that you, as a student, can be successful. Okay.
So just to kind of like break that down a little bit, in no way, shape, or form is the Student Disability Resource Center a mechanism to quote unquote do the work for the student. The idea behind it is to find out exactly the best way that this student can receive information, make sure they receive that information so they then can handle their work and be responsible for it. And so that way the disability is no longer a barrier to their success.
Exactly. What we call when evaluations are done by our disability specialists, we find out what does your disability, what functional limitation does your disability cause? Okay. You can have a visual impairment that doesn't prevent you from getting out of bed to go to class. Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's your degree, your certificate, or whatever accommodations or whatever achievements you've made is no less valuable than someone else's who doesn't have a disability. Okay? We don't change the rigor of the course.
Right.
There's nothing like that. It's just access to the information using technology or other means.
Right. And so, do you have obviously you had multiple jobs in college where you worked with students with disability. Do you have any personal experience with disabilities, maybe family members or you yourself personally, that influences your work?
Okay, sure. Growing up, I was just thinking about this again. Growing up, my cousin, when he was born, he had a disability to his left, a deformed left hand, and so he really didn't have much control of it. But growing up as kids, I don't know. It just was let's say, for example, we rode dirt bikes, motorcycles. Again, we're in the country, so we rode dirt bikes and motorcycles. Or the little playground games the games we made up as kids. Shooting pool. I remember, I still remember us being, my cousin had a pool, and instead of, shooting the cue with, like this, he just take the cue and just rake it. It was still a good shot. He just used the cue to rake it, and so one thing he had to do, he had to be really good at aiming in geometry to make sure he won the game.
Right.
Riding on a motorcycle, pulling the clutch. I was on the back of the motorcycle. He was in the front, and I would pull the clutch in for him to shift the gears. It's just something we just figured it out.
You just figured it out. We didn't
see it as a disability. We just figured it out. How do we have fun? We got a motorcycle. How do we have fun? And so I never, and it never really, I'd never even dawned on me until I actually started working with students with disabilities and being around the environment with students with disabilities as to how people were being limited in their potential just by what someone else may think about them. And then I thought about myself. I'm kind of in the same situation. Someone sees me and immediately biases are formed in the mind.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing as someone with a disability. Immediately biases are formed in the mind. This person is visually impaired. How can they be a doctor? How can they be a surgeon?
And I think that's
one of the.
Well, I just really quick. I think that story, about your cousin is very special because it does a great job at kind of just pulling together that I think that philosophy that you have about the access, right?
Right.
None of you ever stopped your cousin from participating in the way that he needed to participate to try to be successful. And psychologically, I could imagine that that does a lot for a sense of self-esteem and confidence in being able to work through whatever disability that you may have, because the way that it's nurtured, in the way that it's supported, as opposed to always being in a position where you guys are like, no, cousin Jimmy, we're going to do this for you because you can't do it. And then now cousin Jimmy is developing a learned sense of helplessness when it is very much something that can be worked through as long as he has access, right?
Right. Like we played football, we played baseball against we had rivals every once a week. We played the football in the field in the back. We loved it when it rained.
Right.
And we, like I say, we just figured it out.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. So I want to also kind of talk about the concept of, utilizing the Student Disability Resource Center as a Black student.
Sure.
Go ahead. Did you have a comment?
I think that, like I said, we talked about, you mentioned this before about the stigmatism of being a student with a disability or maybe a portion of a hindrance. Just our skin color alone is already a hindrance,
Yes.
in a lot of ways. You walk, like I said, you walk into a place and it's just like watching a TV show and everything just stops because of just your color of the skin, and having to disclose that possibly I may have a disability is just another hurdle that, I've already been jumping all through these hurdles. Now it's another hurdle I got to get over. I'm just going to try to figure it out myself, because a lot of times, that's what we do. We figure it out. We figure it out, just like I mentioned before. We figure out a way to make it happen, But when there's resources that are available for you, and like I mentioned before, your degree is no less valuable than anyone else's degree because you're asking for a resource. We don't guarantee success. We guarantee access, and that's for any student. And speaking on that, as an access specialist, most of the things that I do when it comes to instructors' materials, providing best practices, most of the time it's not just benefiting the student with a disability, it's also benefiting all the students. It's called universal design. I can give this phone to anybody and tell them to turn it on for me. And they probably know that, it's going to be one of these buttons on here going to turn it on. That's universal design.
Yeah.
Right? A screen, there's no keyboard on here. Everyone's got, the universal design is everyone knows somehow you got to swipe the screen or press on the screen to figure something out, right? So when we talk about universal design and universal access, that's what we mean.
Yeah. And I think that's a very key word, right? In the philosophy behind it, especially in the word universal, right? Universal. And I think it's important to frame it that way, because when you look at the Student Disability Resource Center, and if it has this philosophy of creating access through universal or intuitive technology, that benefits everyone, right? Maybe I don't have, I am not formally diagnosed with any form of disability, right? But I know for me, I am a very distracted reader. So me looking at the pages and reading pages, my imagination just starts going nuts, and it's hard for me to focus. But listening, audiobooks, podcasts, things like that, listening, and my level of engagement goes up. And that's a principle of universal design, right? So me, someone who doesn't have a disability, and, if I need to sit down and read a book, I can do that, right? But the universal design that was created for probably centered around folks with disability who really can't read in the traditional sense, right? Now I can enjoy the luxury of, well, at least for me, it's a luxury, right? The luxury of audiobooks and stuff, but it's that concept of universal. So while it might have been inspired from, a marginalized group or population, if we approach it with the right philosophy, it's going to improve the quality of life for everyone, even people who might fall on a disability spectrum that's, very much less than another individual that kind of inspired that tech.
And what I want to have students to, just like they access the tutoring services or may not access the tutoring services, they go to the financial aid, they go to the counseling department, they park their car and they go to TAPS for parking. I want you to see that office as another resource just like that. Right? And that's the goal, because, even if you don't think you have a disability or just come see, it's like any other, you go visit to see what's available there. Right? There may be something that you didn't know. Being able to serve a student that's broken their leg temporarily or broken an arm or has something like that. We didn't do that at the other college that I had. That wasn't a service that the disability services offered, not that I know of, and I worked there for 17 years. But I would imagine not many people know that if I've got to take off a quarter of school because I can't get around campus. Well, that's not true.
Right.
And so it's really, I think it's really important for people to know what services are available in the different, not only in our office, but in different offices. And as far as the stigmatisms are concerned, just think about how much you can achieve if you've got that extra, support behind you. It may not take, maybe instead of being there for 5 years, you're there for 4 years.
Right. No, and that makes a big difference. So, and I kind of just, want to touch on that a little bit, because again, when it comes to Black students, I do think there is somewhat of a culture of not wanting to pursue resources. And again, it can be counseling and psychological services. It can be the disability services. It can be financial wellness services. There's a long-standing history in literature around Black folks underutilizing, certain key services for one reason or another. And so for me, it's just very important to express to Black students in particular, like, there is no shame in receiving services. That's what it's here for. And if you don't at least pursue the resources and the services, you are just wasting out on so much value that you're paying for in your tuition and fees. And so how can we meet Black students where they're at and kind of break down some of that hesitation that they might feel? What are your thoughts on that?
One thing I would like to see is that, obviously, for some of our students, what I said before, like 10% of the population, you can give it an average around 10% of your population has a disability in some kind of way or need, some kind of need. Maybe it's food insecurities, financial insecurities, whatever it may be, a home, just having a place to sleep, lay down and rest. If it's maybe we need to step back a little bit, if we can have a meet and greet out on the front lawn. Come tell me what struggles are you having, what successes are you having right now? What struggles are you having right now? How can we help you? Or this is some help that we can help you to overcome some of those struggles. I think when I read, I kind of doze off sometimes, or just reading stuff doesn't get to me. I need to hear it auditorially.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. We don't have to go into that office. You don't have to go to if that's the barrier. If the office is the barrier, then maybe we need to step back a little bit so we can break that barrier.
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm willing to do that. If I have to come in on the weekend and do it, I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. And and again, that's the whole point of, our podcast. That's the whole point of Blue, Gold, and Black. And it's really to let students know, like, one, Will Pines, he's a real human being. Two, he's a brother. You can relate, you can identify with that. And three, he's dedicated to making you be successful, and he wants to meet you where you're at. And I always encourage students, right, between the older and the younger generation, it has to be a mutual effort on both ends, right? You on your end, you have to make sure that your hand is extended backwards and you're reaching, and then on the younger generations, and it's making sure, like, whatever is preventing you from reaching for that hand, overcoming those obstacles mentally, to make sure that you can make that connection. Because even if it's not something that you could directly assist the students with as it pertains to the Disability Resource Center, you come with a whole wealth of knowledge and connections around the campus to make sure you can put that student in the right place. And so that's what I really just want to emphasize to students, is to make sure that you feel empowered and encouraged to reach out to our guests, because it's a whole wealth of knowledge and resources that, one email can give you access to, and sometimes that's all you need. So I just want to, we're coming up on, the end of our interview, and, this has been a great talk, and we can definitely spend, future episodes really kind of unpacking this conversation around disabilities. But I just kind of want to ask you this, and it's just kind of like, about your sense of Black optimism. So, what can you say to future generations of Black scholars coming through UCR? What is one of your most optimistic visions of the future for the next generation of Black scholars that come through UCR?
Given the events that have happened in the last 6 months, a year, I see optimism in people coming together, for a cause. I still see that students are leading the way, and I'm not one to be drawn into the regular the what we call cable news, media news. If I want information, I'm going to go to the source, right? And so I think that. I think it's been my experience that students are usually that group of people are really changing things, and I know we can do more. Yeah, like I said, we talked about before, that 10% is probably those as far as the number of students on your campus with a disability or some kind of need. Yeah. They're deficient in something, some kind of insecurity that they're in. And I know as far as our Black scholars, I don't see that many students in my office. Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be about a disability. If we need to meet outside the office to talk about something, then we need to do that. Yeah. And so that's one of my I don't know if I have in today's world right now. I think there's more worry about students not seeking what they need. Yeah. Right now, that's my biggest worry. Students not seeking what they need. Yeah. For whatever reason, and feeling or having the perception that they don't have someone or some place they can go to get that need. Yeah. No, absolutely, and kind of what you just said, in my mind, it's just all about crashing those barriers, right? Students, like we said, students for whatever reason aren't getting the resources that they need, and they simply could just not be aware, right? Or it comes with stigmatism of
I don't want to have to put another chip on my shoulder. I don't want to have another quality in this society that paints me a certain type of way. And I think people like you are doing a great job at crashing down those barriers and making sure that you're presenting yourself as someone who's open, someone that students can get a genuine response from. And I think that goes a long way. And I agree with you 1,000% that students are really always on the forefront of the revolution, of the change that we see taking place across our campus. And, as staff, I always want us to be in a position where we can further empower them. And, that's why we're here today having a conversation. So
definitely,
students, if nothing else, shoot Mr. Pines an email.
Just reach out and say hi.
Just say, what's up? How you doing? He's down to talk. But on a serious tip, access to resources, access. That's what we're talking about as we push towards, a more equitable future, making sure that everyone has access. So, Will, thank you so much for joining us on Blue, Gold, and Black. I can't wait to have you back on in the future so we can keep pushing this conversation forward. Thank you so much for taking out the time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you, brother. See you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I'll catch you guys later. Thank you for joining us on Blue, Gold, and Black. This program is produced by the Community Engagement and Outreach Unit of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of California, Riverside. Learn more about attending UCR by visiting admissions.ucr.edu, and be sure to check out the description for other useful links and resources. Help support this podcast by liking, subscribing, and sharing. And be sure to check out our podcast videos on YouTube. Catch you guys later.